Hi everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me and we are live. So good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for this e-commerce and accessibility webinar brought to you by CyberDuck and BigCommerce. Today we'll be talking about how accessibility can boost website conversion rates. We have some fantastic talks lined up for you today, so I think it'd be great to get started. And just to quickly go through our agenda for today. So we'll first just give a quick introduction to our structure and our experts, as well as providing you a bit of introduction to who we are at CyberDuck. We then have 3 fantastic talks for you, and then we'll finish up with a quick summary and a Q&A session. So our webinar today is going to last for an hour. We'll have 45 minutes for our talks and 15 minutes at the end for any of your questions. If you wish to submit a question, the best way to do this is using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. You can also post any questions you have after the webinar using the hashtag A11YDuck. So I think the first thing to do is just introduce our speakers for today. So let's start with Connor. Hi there, Connor. It'd be great to know a little bit about yourself and what you do at CyberDuck.
So hi there, I'm Connor Fox. I'm a front-end developer here at CyberDuck, and over the past 2 years, I've basically become immersed in accessibility in many aspects, and it's since become a passion of mine, because despite the many reasons we'll touch on, it simply boils down to being candid and asking, why shouldn't everyone have the opportunity to use the web, whoever they may be? Otherwise, yeah, there's the usual front-end stuff in terms of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and everything that comes with that.
That's great. Sylvain, hello. How are you today? Again, it'd be great to know a little bit more about what you do at CyberDuck.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Sylvain Reiter, the co-founder and client services officer at CyberDuck. So yeah, mostly help clients and our teams to make the right decision when it comes to digital solutions, in terms of selecting a platform, delivering a specific strategy, and yeah, supporting the team to make sure we deliver top quality for our clients.
That's great. And last but not least, we have Patrick from BigCommerce. Hi there, Patrick. Again, it'd be great to know what you do at BigCommerce and a little bit about what BigCommerce does.
Should probably unmute. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me again. I'm really excited to be part of the panel today. So my name is Patrick O'Connor, and I head our professional services for BigCommerce in the EMEA region. So I manage the strategy, direction, and day-to-day operations of our client success managers, implementation project managers, technical account managers, solutions architects, and some support functions as well. So just a brief overview of BigCommerce. I had to give the quick elevator pitch. BigCommerce marries the best of multi-tenant SaaS platform, a shared code base type of SaaS setup where a lot of the responsibility around hosting and releases and all that kind of stuff is on our responsibility, with open-ended development. So something that we call open SaaS. So we give you all the tools you need right out of the box to run a really powerful e-commerce site, but also give you a lot of control in terms of customizing your front end and customizing your business logic as well, down to the code level. So BigCommerce is a e-commerce platform for merchants at any phase of growth, from smaller mom and pop shops up to the biggest brands in the world. And I think that open SaaS model really helps us to power that and enable those merchants. And we'll talk a little bit about how we also power accessible development as well too on our platform.
That's really great. Thank you very much for that. So a little bit about us at CyberDuck. So we're a digital transformation agency with 15 years experience, working across different sort of website, mobile, and UX projects. We're a remote first team, which has given us now the ability to scale beyond the UK. We work across the world with many different clients. For us, we have such a fantastic team who have been building our own methodologies and processes in everything from user research to DevOps. And for us, an area that we're really passionate about is accessibility, which is something we'll be speaking to you today on. As you'll hear from the first talk, for us, accessibility isn't just a bolt-on or something to do to tick a box. It's something that should be present throughout your project. And I think with that in mind, it'd be perfect to pass on to Sylvain for our first talk.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So here we're here today to really educate everyone on the importance of accessibility. I'm not there to turn you to an evangelist from tomorrow when you go back to work, but I want to give you at least the basic understanding, so you can take it back at work and promote it within your team, to have the ammunition to convince them to really invest in accessibility. So it becomes a mindset to your entire team and development process. So let's start with a bit of background on accessibility. For those who maybe are a bit less familiar with it, it's important to understand what we're talking about today. First of all, accessibility is a set of principles that allows us, web designers and web developers, to create web content and an application that everyone can use and understand, no matter their situation or disabilities. The common term in the industry is using the anagram of poor, but my colleague Connor will give you more details about each point in the next section. Accessibility is also defined as a standard, it's a set of digital standards, the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guideline. They have 3 levels of conformance, A, AA, and AAA, and each level has different criteria and goals, different measurement to achieve that rating, such as the contrast ratio. It varies depending on the level you want to achieve. So they clearly define the standard, and that's why we get audited against, for example, when we need to pass some sort of legal audit or accessibility validation. And finally, accessibility really is a mindset, because it's not just for developers to implement alt tag on the images, or it's not a tick box at the end of a project checklist or during an audit. And there's no quick fix with overlay solutions, for example. To be successful, it really needs to become part of your entire process, of your team mindset, and everyone has a role to play at every stage, from the planning, the user experience, and you look at the architecture, the navigation, all the way to the visual design and content design. Obviously, a lot of work on the development side and the templates, as Connor will explain a bit more later. And also focusing on that post-launch and ongoing improvement, because it's never over, it's never done. There's always ways to improve that. So that's why we're advocating tonight to all of you that you can do it better and implement better accessibility for your e-commerce website. But to really convince you, I guess you need to understand the why. Like, why should you bother? Why, if you need, or either yourself, or if you're already convinced, but you need to help to convince your boss or your team to build more inclusive e-commerce solution, you need more arguments and better data. So let's start with that. The main reason on why you might want to do better at accessibility is because it's the law. It's very simple. And in the US, the ADA Section 508, in the UK Disability Act, in EU, Australia, all major territories have that ingrained in the law now. And so that, I guess that's the first compelling argument. It's never good for business to go against the law, but in most places, it's actually becoming mandatory for all the public sector organization. But even private companies can get in trouble if they don't provide an accessible solution for their users. So you need to consider that at all time. More than any potential fine, you need to think about the negative PR and the reputational damage to your brand values. It's really hard to put a price on that. So again, at least you can do it because it's the law. Second reason why you might want to do better at accessibility is because it's best practices. If it's done properly, your e-commerce website will be more compatible with older browsers and future devices. If the code is well optimized and well structured, it would load faster, it would be visually engaging, and it will boost your SEO as well, because it's some of the criteria that Google is considering now in their new ranking update. So that's another good reason why you might want to do it right. And to be fair, you should do it also because the basics are not that hard. Basic kind of compatibility with assistive technology you need to make sure that the images are well optimized and have alt tag, that the links are tagged properly, that the form fields have label and validation, and that the overall structure of the website can be navigated with keyboard navigation. Obviously, there are some more advanced elements, such as the heading structure and the content strategy and some other things on the technical architecture. But really, every designer and developer should understand the basics to build the template correctly and get it right first time. As we will see later, you can use platforms like eCommerce, where out-of-the-box themes takes care of most of those criteria. However, despite it being straightforward, or the basics being straightforward, the word and the rest of the internet is very far behind. A recent study from Baymard a few months ago benchmarked the top 33 e-commerce websites in the UK and US across the 4 areas of accessibility that I mentioned: the images, the links, the form fields, and the keyboard navigation. They measured that against the WCAG accessibility guideline AA, so the middle success criteria. And the results are quite stark. Apparently 94% of those websites are not compliant with all 4 of those basic accessibility requirements. So there's still a lot of education and a lot of work to make e-commerce truly accessible for everyone. And you might also want to do better accessibility because it's good for business. We've all had kind of e-commerce boom in the last couple of years. Obviously, the convenience of ordering online has been there for a long time, but even more during lockdown for everyone, and even more for users with motor disabilities. And so when you optimize for accessibility, it can open up your product range to new customers. It can increase conversion from an untapped audience that you might not be able to reach. Because a recent study from ClickAway Pound stated that 69% of disabled users with access needs will click away from a website if they encounter accessibility barriers. So if they're browsing your website with their assistive technology and they're unable to browse or find the product that they're looking for, they'll just leave and go to try and buy somewhere else, to one of your competitor. So it's hard to put a number, monetary value on that, but even if you can increase 0.1 or 0.2% of your conversion, surely that would keep your boss very happy, isn't it? And it's not just about browsing and the checkout experience that you need to plan for. It's also thinking about the online customer service. Important stat about resolving customer complaint is if you can manage that complaint online, it costs you about 7p. Over the phone is £5, and in store 17 pounds. And then if you need to do more advanced thorough investigation, it could be the thousands of pounds. So again, considering that coming straight off your bottom line, you need to optimize for customer service on your digital platform as well. And finally, actually, you can pretty much forget about the 4 previous points. You should really do better at accessibility because it's the right thing to do. As I said, when it's done right, it benefits everyone. If your website is inaccessible, even if it's not done on purpose, even unintentionally, it's almost like discrimination to a certain part of the population or a certain group of users. And more importantly, there's over 1 billion people on the planet, 15% of the world's population, that are reporting officially some sort of disability. And that's counting the official one. So there's probably even more unofficial one as well. So whether it's a permanent, a temporary, or a situational disability, a lot of users are affected by reading difficulties, visual impairments, physical disabilities, and not all of them necessarily impact internet use. But again, it would be very unwise to purposely exclude 25, 15, or even 5% of your potential customers. So I think overall, it just brings the right culture when you prioritize accessibility. It helps fosters a culture of diversity and empathy towards your user and overall inclusivity. So you should just do it and don't leave anyone behind. So to see it in action and see the impact of good accessibility, I wanted to share a quick demo from Yaye, who is our diversity and accessibility lead at CyberDuck. He ran a test. He's visually impaired, and he's been testing some of our clients' websites. So we're going to look at a short video from the Great Wine Company, which we're featuring today. a site that we've built on the BigCommerce platform. And Yaya is trying to order a bottle using screen reader technology. So this is how we got along.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Yahya Siyad. So I am a gentleman with visual impairment and I use a screen reader called JAWS. So here I am at this website called Great Wine, and I'm going to be slowing it down a little bit.
Slower.
So you can guys follow up with me. So
Links list dialog.
what I do is I use keyboard shortcuts. I don't use mouse at all. So I start with normally going through the links. So I bring the links up.
Fast, free, great winder, Lasater Volant,
So let's, for example, I'm going to choose this one.
Bonnie Dune Vineyard, 11
Bonnie Dune Vineyard.
Enter.
Just as an example. Okay, I've chosen that one.
The Great Wine Co.
And now it's just gonna.
Lasater Volant.
I'm gonna choose the quantity.
one.
So I just again use keyboard shortcuts like those ones, usual F or S or D. Each one has different headings. So it's very important to have clear headings and clear layout.
Quantity edit, increased quantity, quantity edit 1, increased quantity,
Increased quantity.
Enter, form region, quantity edit 2.
So now I have 2.
Increased quantity, add to basket button.
Add to basket.
Enter, adding ... button unavailable,
Okay,
57.
now I'm gonna go to checkout.
See, checkout now, 5 of enter. The Great Wine Co.
Okay.
Page has 1 region, 10 headings and 6 links. The Great Wine Co. Heading level, the Great Wine Co.
See?
Edit button. First name edit, M8.
So this already my details are stored because I was doing some testing before I started recording.
Last name edit, Hoover.
I'm just obviously this is my details, just random names.
Company name
the
option.
details of the customer.
Address line 1 edit. Address line 2 op.
Address,
City edit. London country
city.
combo. County optional edit. Select a county.
County.
Postal code edit. Phone number. Postal county up country combo box. GB.
So this is county GP is very important option here that to illustrate because it's easy to make website accessible for most of the stuff, but when it gets tricky is, for example, the combo box.
Enter read only. Form region. Country.
You open it with enter, then you go through the options.
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan,
American.
alphabetically. So I'm going to choose example. I don't know,
Subtotal
let's
3.
say
Uganda. Ukraine. United Arab Emirates.
United Arab Emirates, just an example.
United Kingdom.
Or
Activate West Enter.
continue. Now it goes to the last stage of the booking. So see, the idea basically is that it's easy to find what you're looking for. It's easy to put in your details and it's easy to make a payment. Just as simple as every customer needs.
Edit button. Edit button. Edit button. Credit or debit card. Visa, Amex, Master, Dinners Club. Discover my store.
Credit
Radio
card
button.
gives you all option of credit card.
Credit card number edit.
Credit card numbers.
Enter.
I'm
Read
just
only.
putting
Form
the
region. Read
random
only.
number
Credit card.
here.
Form region. Credit free. 8 2 9 4 5 9 6.
You can see what I'm talking about.
Expiration
Very
date
easy.
MM/YY.
Expiration date, it mentioned MM/YY. I'm just putting 12
2
to 5. Just random.
Read only. Form region. Terms and conditions. Yes, I agree with the terms and conditions. Checkbox not checked.
I
Check
agree with the
space
term
bar.
condition. This is again very important feature because most of the websites don't have this checked in options
Space
so
checked.
easily. So it's checked in and it's very easy, straightforward.
Terms and conditions link.
Alrighty, so as you could see,
Place order button. Back.
Place order.
Read only. Form.
There you go. Yeah. So you see, it's always, I don't know if you've seen that before. It's always very impressive to hear. And he slowed down even the voiceover. But see, I was using keyboard navigation. And again, it's down to the structure of the website, making sure everything is in the right order, giving access through the keyboard shortcut and clear description every time it rolls over an element. The screen reader technology explain what's on the button. And Connor will give you more detail about best practices on implementation. So now that you understand what we're talking about when we say accessible website and why you need to implement in your e-commerce projects, to get started, really, it's about preparing your team. As I said, it's need to build that mindset that everyone is behind and working in the same direction. Secondly, you need to define your KPI. So decide on which of the 3 levels of the WCAG guidelines which one you want to achieve. You also need to pick a platform, because whether you decide to build it from scratch or use a Magento theme or BigCommerce predefined template, it will have an impact on how much work you need to do. So pick the right platform and make sure the templates and the themes and all the functionalities have accessibility baked in. Don't rely too much on overlay solution, as we've discussed, and allow enough time for your team as well. It's not just about rushing the development and making it look pretty. You need to implement those accessibility improvements, spend enough time with usability testing. And again, Connor will talk more about that. And continue to test before launch, after launch, it's ongoing. So this is what my colleague Connor now will present in more details on the next section. So over to you, Connor.
So hello again, I'm Connor, a front-end dev here at Cyberduck. And in this section, I hope to give you a start in understanding how you actually go about making your website more accessible. The front end of a website can certainly be where a lot of accessibility work happens, but it goes across every department. And as mentioned, it's everyone's responsibility. So we've mentioned it's an ongoing process. That's because a site is not simply accessible or inaccessible. Any site you encounter will at least be somewhat accessible because it's more of a scale effectively. And the placement on that can improve as you implement, but still needs maintenance as you go, such as if you then add an entirely new feature or if guidance or standards change. So there are two main parts to having an accessible website: implementation and testing. Much like the product itself, testing and QA is a part of the process, no matter what situation you're in. So if you're developing a brand new website, it's best to set it as a requirement from the start. Weave it through your planning and implement and test as you go, because what better way to help initial retention than ensuring that every person who comes to the site can use it? And in the case of an existing website, you would first test or audit and then implement the fixes and changes based on that. So naturally, we can start with testing. So testing accessibility, there's two types. It's quite straightforward in that it's automated or manual, and both of these are easily accessible to you and your team. So firstly, we have automated reporting. We'll start with that, as this is honestly where I'd advise to start. There's a variety of tools available currently, and each tool is often varied in itself, but overall has the same intention. So we have three examples here. Firstly, we have Wave, the web accessibility evaluation tool. This is created by a nonprofit in the US and is purely focused on accessibility testing. You'd normally use it as a browser extension, so Chrome, Firefox, or Edge, and then you can just get started. It normally presents issues in a very visual manner, whether that's issues, warnings, structural data, and everything along those lines. The next example would be Google Lighthouse. This is, as you'd expect, from Google, and it's built right into Chrome itself as part of the DevTools suite. So Lighthouse also offers various other reporting pieces to it in terms of performance and SEO. Obviously, in this case, accessibility is where we're interested. So if you do use Chrome on a daily basis, it's a great tool that you can instantly use right now. Any website you go on, you can run a Lighthouse report without a worry. And it will provide you with a score for the current page, which is often arbitrary, but it's nice to see 100 or something like that. And it offers additional useful features like manual checks you should also perform. So if you're not sure where to start, it gives you a sort of instant value and then gives you somewhere to go from there. Thirdly, we've got Axe. This is from Deck, a company that provides a wide toolkit for testing accessibility. Much like Wave, they have a free Chrome extension to start, but offer higher paid tiers as you go up, providing more of functionality. And Wave offers in-depth testing and could be seen as sort of the other end of the scale compared to the more visual and direct Wave. So the three of these are not the only options, but they're all a great place to start. And if you're looking to improve an existing website, whether you're familiar with accessibility or relatively new, remember that it's a process. Every step counts, whether big or small, and each one will benefit at least one person going forward. And these automated tools are a very inoffensive and easy way to jumpstart your journey. So then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum is manual reporting. And automated testing can certainly do a lot, but it can't do everything. And manual testing is exactly what it says on the tin, because what better way to test how usable your website is with a screen reader than testing it with a screen reader? So it's great. As much like automated, you can do it yourself. You can get help from people you know, people with disabilities. Manual testing at its core is just simply user testing. And the more you do it, the more you'll gradually learn as you go along. It's exactly how I have the knowledge I have today, and obviously in the future we'll continue to learn and grow. As with before, and to be honest, web and text in general, there is acronyms galore here. So we have WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, as mentioned by Sylv. These are guidelines created by WAI, the Accessibility Initiative, which is then run by W3C, which is likely the one part of this that's more familiar, the World Wide Web Consortium, which is effectively the standards org for the web. So as I've mentioned again, the WCAG guidelines and standards to determine how accessible your website currently is. Currently, we're on WCAG 2.1 standards, which was released around 3 years ago, I believe, and 2.2 is scheduled to be released at some point this year. And all of the criteria and how you can satisfy them is openly available from the W3C. And outside of that, there's a massive wealth of ever-growing resource as people, much like yourselves, become more involved in the effort to make the web more accessible, whether it's through articles, guides, or entire communities. And of course, this is an introduction, and there's a lot of criteria that needs to be reviewed. So if you want to ensure and guarantee compliance with one of the levels, professional auditors exist to help you with this, whether it's charities like the RNIB, the Royal National Institute of Blind People, or consulting firms such as Test Partners, who you may know from our previous accessibility roundtable. They can provide you with a report that indicates compliance status of every single point of the WCAG criteria, with recommendations on how to fix or improve any non-compliances, whilst working back and forth with you to achieve that intended level of compliance. This is something I've personally dealt with on multiple projects, and is honestly the biggest part in making your website as accessible as possible. But in the same way, it's equally rewarding for your team and, of course, your site's performance. So then, implementing accessibility, how do you do it? So implementing accessibility is best done by recognizing it as not an addition, a tick box, something to check off at the end. It's now a part of best practice and is simply a part of the design, development, and creation of a website as a whole. Nowadays, I wouldn't use inline styles as a dev. You wouldn't omit essential SEO items like H1s, metadata. These are just things we do now, even if they weren't done as standard previously. So treating it like this is the easiest way forward. And this applies across the board, whether it's a designer working on branding a header, you would factor in contrast ratios of the color that you're using. If you're a dev creating a custom HTML component, you would add the right area and other attributes. Or if you're just creating content, all images should have a great alt tag, and it'd be great if a YouTube video had captions, and even better if it had audio description. And so the best way to illustrate all of these is with some examples. And the simplest breakdown, as Sylv mentioned, is the PAW principles, to give you a good immediate understanding of the different things you might be doing. So P is for perceivable. This includes things like text alternatives to non-text content, such as video captions, audio description, transcripts, alt text on things like images. Color contrast is also an important part of this. Vision can be a range of complex things. So here you'll see again the two automated testing tools I raised earlier, Axe and Wave. There's a reason why I decided to add the white background logos that you can see rather than transparent backgrounds, because in the case of Axe, on this green part of the gradient background, it honestly just sort of melds away and isn't really legible at all. And then on the opposite end with Wave, the icon works reasonably well, considering it's also primarily blue, but the dark text color, the dark gray, makes it significantly harder to read on this background. And here, as a real life example, we have a snippet of a promotional banner from the website that you looked at. And you can see we decided on using a white box background for the banner's content, as the images and content frequently revolve, as you might expect for promotions. And in such a context, a white background gives us both consistency, that the text will always meet the criteria, and that also it fits into the design of the general website. So then we have O in PAW, which is for operable. This is about giving a user the ability to complete an action, however big or small, whatever it may be. So keyboard operability is certainly the most well-known example when it comes to accessibility. And when it comes to this, we can take this example of the search box and icons in the header. So I'd use the tab key to navigate through the header with only my keyboard. I can easily see which element I'm currently focused on due to the outline, in this case, the basket. And then you can see a similar example below that with the images of various spirits. So if I were to hit tab whilst focused on the first image, I'd expect to then be focused on the second and the outline to represent that. And then again, on pressing it, I would be on the third. This is simply tab order. It's quite straightforward, fortunately. But if I suddenly then hit tab from being on run and ended up at social links in the footer, that would be very confusing. And it's often something that we don't realize because a lot of us will not use a keyboard to navigate through a website. So tab order can easily make or break how easy someone finds navigating your website. And then finally, time allowance is probably the most general example of benefiting everyone. If you've ever been in a car or basket and suddenly had it time out whilst looking for a card in the house or something like that, or if you've ever tried reading a paragraph of a subtitle whilst watching a show and suddenly it disappears halfway through, time allowance is a pretty varied option, but it can benefit users in a range of ways because of that. So then we have you in the pool, which is quite understandable. So here we have an example of error handling and feedback on the right. So I've clicked in the email field, entered something that clearly wasn't an email, and then continued down the form. And immediately, as soon as I accessed another field, I'm told that that wasn't a valid email. Then I went back, entered a correct email, and the error disappears, and I'm given visual approval that what I've entered is correct. In both of these, I've been given both written and visual, specifically color in this case, or icon-based approval to make this clear. Otherwise, I mean, if it was just color, tying into the importance of color from earlier, the most common form of color blindness is red-green. If I'd only have used color to indicate success or error in this case, I'm sure it would make signing up harder for a sizable portion of people. And then imagine if you were not given password requirements. That's probably a great example of not being given password requirements when trying to create a password. You just have to guess and keep trying until you suddenly had an acceptable password. And that might not even give you the approval on the field itself. It might be every time you submit the whole form, you might have to re-enter data. There's a lot of little bits that we're sort of thankful for, that accessibility needs exaggerating in a sense. Secondly, we have consistency and predictability. Again, quite a straightforward one. If I navigate to a new page with a screen reader and suddenly the header's in a different pace and it's reading out completely different elements, or I'm hearing an entirely different layout of some sense, how confident am I going to feel navigating this website? And then finally, readability, which is as simple as the language being used. I've seen an article that felt like they'd used a thesaurus heavily just to spice it up for no reason, which is unpleasant for me to read, but let alone someone who may have difficulty with their reading skills for whatever reason. And then finally, we have R for robust. This one can be a little harder to comprehend as it's less specific, but that's because it's exactly what it says on the tin. Tech that only works with a specific system or is only available in one environment, like only being available on an iPhone versus an Android phone, can easily gate people out of something they need. In the same way, third-party content can have a similar effect, such as widgets or embeds. If the user cannot access that embed, or they're not accessible if they can, that's content on your website that they're struggling with. An infamous example of this is the Google logo on a Google Maps embed not having an alt tag. It's simple, yet the link that would normally take you to Google and expand upon this maps is now more confusing to those that need that alternative non-text content. So something I'd hope each developer strives for every day is then clean code and best practices. Nowadays, browsers are very forgiving. They'll try to interpret broken code correctly, and visually it will often look fine, you wouldn't even know, but code can still be broken behind the scenes, affecting those that would use alternative methods such as a keyboard or screen readers as mentioned before. So source code of a page can easily be checked out by the example here. This is W3C's new HTML checker, NU, not NEW. And as you can see here, it's highlighting a couple of issues with the structure of some elements on the page, which may be affecting some or even all users in this case, because we're losing important closing elements. And then ultimately, what does all of this mean? I mean, simply put, if you do it, it will become a part of the process. The more you do it, the more you'll learn and the easier it becomes. And to make it easier and more effective, everyone should get in on it, whatever position you hold, whatever you do when you manage this website. Remember that whether you're new to this or have some experience, every step counts. You can take the first step right now, and there's so much support and resources out there to help guide you along the way. So I hope this has given you enough of an insight as to how you can kickstart opening your website out to more users. And now I'll hand over to Patrick from eCommerce.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Connor. Great. So I think some really great points that we talked about today in terms of the what and the why around building accessible web pages. And what I want to talk about now is how can you do this on an e-commerce platform like BigCommerce. So I'm mostly going to focus on the why and the how today. So I'm going to have some slides that go over why it's important to build accessible e-commerce websites and exactly how you can do that on BigCommerce and what some of the resources are that we have in place to assist with accessible design. Next slide. Great. So why build an accessible e-commerce website? So I think that there's a couple of reasons. Legal requirements being a pretty clear one. I know in the United States, we're seeing a trend of ADA compliance lawsuits on web pages that don't meet minimum ADA compliances. I know that some of the legal stuff is starting to ramp up for EMEA as well too. So it becomes a really important legal risk mitigation to make sure you have it done. In addition to that, there's the social and societal responsibility. I think that the internet should be built for everyone. The more people that are participating in the internet and interacting and able to purchase things and view and interact with websites, the better. In addition to the societal and the legal, website accessibility can improve conversion rates. So you're not just talking about doing the right thing from the legal and societal standpoint, you're talking about opening up the market in which you are a viable option to. And that can be a really powerful thing for many businesses. Next slide. So according to Nucleus Research, companies without accessible sites are losing 6.9 billion a year to competitors whose sites are accessible. When we looked at some of the earlier slides and we saw that the top 94% of web pages still have some accessibility issues on them when you run an audit, that's a huge opportunity to step in and position yourself as a site that is accessible friendly. There's a lot of people that would probably like to shop for many products on that site, but simply can't because the website doesn't enable them to transact at the end of the day with their accessibility. So stepping in and offering that website to people that have been marginalized or not been able to participate in the internet in the same way can be a really strong differentiation point. So how can BigCommerce help merchants? There's three things I'm going to focus on. One is that traditional SaaS offering, out-of-the-box functionality. And then we're going to talk about how customizable our platform is at the theme and code level. And we're going to talk about our powerful integrations and partnerships as well. So let's talk about out-of-the-box functionality first. So BigCommerce is a robust SaaS application that allows you to manage business logic from a control panel type view, and also manage the way in which your website looks like from built-in page building tools and theme editing tools as well too. You can also export and build your own theme file as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more, or use a powerful third party to host your website's front-end experience. So out of the box, our default storefront and checkout experience is WCAG guideline 3.1 compliant. So what that means is that text readability across that theme file is optimized for accessibility. And you'll see that in the fonts that we use, the spacings that we use, and a lot of the contrast between background and foreground coloring. We saw some earlier examples of that in the slide as well too. The built-in catalog tools also let you enrich products with data points that enable third-party accessibility applications to do their best work. So for example, giving you the ability to add things like alt text alternatives for non-text content, product images, and photos can give third-party tools that do text-to-speech or image interpretation through speech. They give it that information that it needs in order to do its job as well. So all that is built in and able to be managed through BigCommerce right out of the box. In addition, Cornerstone is WCAG compliant for keyboard accessibility, timing, so giving people the correct amount of time to enter in some information or complete a step on a website before timing out, input modals, navigation, and readability. Next slide. So here in this image, you'll see how you can navigate through the default Cornerstone theme just with using keyboard inputs. For someone with an impairment that prevents them from being able to use a mouse, being able to scroll through a web page like this is fundamental, I think, to accessibility enablement for a web page. And when doing this, a lot of the time, these are the actions and steps that trigger a lot of that alt text reading and a lot of other accessibility enablement as well too. Next. Great. So let's talk about some of the customizability on our platform and how we power that. So there's a couple of things that I want to highlight. The list is so long, what you can do in a BigCommerce theme file when you're getting down to the code level. And especially if you're talking about using a front-end experience manager, like an Adobe Experience Manager or something else powerful to power that front end, it really becomes infinite what you can do. But what I want to focus on is alt tags in particular. Alt tags are a little bit of extra metadata that you can add to images and other components on your site that are going to enable those third-party applications that do a lot of the text-to-speech type translations on a page. There's a whole host of apps that I think do really great work with that. In addition to that, we also have some guidance on how to do ARIA label attributes. So this was something that I learned about in doing the webinar today, and it was really enlightening to learn. But basically what an ARIA label attribute allows you to do is specifically dictate what you want the third-party application that's doing text-to-speech to read on a site. So typically, a lot of the times, alt tags and image alt text can be sort of programmatically and sort of sterilely put onto a website. So if a user parsed over something, some of the times it's just going to read the text that's in the image without the context. So for example, a button that says click here, but it says click here under an image of someone buying some headphones. The user isn't going to necessarily understand that it means click here to buy headphones. An ARIA label attribute allows you to specifically dictate what's going to be read back and can give some really important context cues around where we're trying to guide the particular shopper. And I think it's critical for enabling your site to be accessible for people with visual impairment. Next slide. So here we can see our page builder, and you can see right here how easy it is to customize a page on BigCommerce. So everything from contrasting to text size can be managed here. And you can also see we build right in alt text ability right inside of our page builder. So nothing needs to be done at the code level to help control alt text and image text. Next page. The other thing that we do here at BigCommerce is we are really partner-centric. We believe in not reinventing the wheel. What we try to provide at BigCommerce is a really robust back-end and front-end solution for e-commerce. All the other players like payment and tax and accessibility vendors that are providing apps in the space, we know they're going to do it better than us. So we enable you to integrate those applications and third parties powerfully into BigCommerce. In our app store right now, we have a really great integration with Essential. Essential is an auditing tool that helps you programmatically parse through a site and help to identify weaknesses that you might find in your site's accessibility. It does automated testing, keeps up to date with the current requirements, and basically just runs automatically and can spit out a report. Now, I think that it's a really great tool to have, but I think it needs to be paired with something like a human audit. Many times these automated programs will catch about 30 to 40% of where you're coming out of compliance, but it's really important to get that feedback from people that have accessibility issues or experts that know how to work through a site to understand if you're meeting the needs of your market. So the other thing that can help too is in the know partners. You know, working with a partner like CyberDuck on your BigCommerce build, you're going to ensure that you have accessibility experts working on your site. So they're going to be able to build and audit your site and make sure that it's 100% compliant and really meeting, like I said, the needs of the market. So I want to provide some resources as well too. These are a couple of articles that I think are really helpful. Some of them focus more on the higher level product, and some of them get more into the developer and code level information. Website accessibility and ADA compliance support article kind of walks through where we are out of the box, ADA and WCAG compliant. DevDocs, developing accessible BC themes. That's going to get into a little bit more about what I was talking about at developing at the code level. How do you do ARIA level attributes? And some other really helpful accessibility compliance stuff that you can do at the code level as well. Building BigCommerce for accessibility article, kind of a companion piece to number 2. And then number 4 is a blog post we published in March, in which we talk about how we brought Cornerstone accessibility to the forefront in our version 5.2 of that theme file. So highly recommend checking out those resources if you're interested in building an accessible site on BigCommerce. So in conclusion, number 1, the internet is for everyone. I think we do all owe that societal responsibility to build accessible websites. The good thing is that accessible design is beautiful design. So when you're building an accessible site, you're not making sacrifices around quality or efficiency. In fact, accessible websites can improve conversion. BigCommerce gets accessibility. We build it into our platform right out of the box. And so do our partners like CyberDuck, which we're really happy to share this time with and talk a little bit more about the importance and the opportunity of accessible web design. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Patrick. And thank you, Connor and Sylvan, as well for your talks. Before we get on to the Q&A, I just wanted to kind of put down some key takeaways for everyone. And I think a very important first one to start with, it can be very powerful in your team to have an accessibility expert, but it shouldn't just be one person's sole responsibility. Accessibility is something that everyone needs to be aware of and build their skills up in. I think as well, to add, lots of the stuff we've talked about today is how you can improve the usability of your website, and the knock-on effect of that can mean that you can drive better performance and better ROI. There's obviously also the compliancy part of this, particularly for companies in America, who many of which are getting sued because their website isn't accessible. But also, the reason really you should do accessibility, as Sylvan said at the start, it is the right thing to do. You wouldn't want a bricks and mortar shop to be inaccessible, so why would you want a website to be? And as a kind of a last point, when you're doing an accessibility audit, there are many automated tools out there that can really help you. I think Google Lighthouse and Wave are fantastic places to start, as kind of said, but there's nothing better than getting your website in the hands of users. And you should really be doing your testing with non-disabled people, disabled people, people who may have certain situational disability. If you're interested in talking to more of us about accessibility, or if you have an e-commerce challenge, or if you are a BigCommerce user and want to get a bit more insight into what's available, then we are available to talk. So we can always have to organize virtual coffee. Best way to probably reach us is via email. So we're hello@cyber-duck.co.uk. You can also reach us on Twitter. We're @cyberduck_UK. And then we're also on LinkedIn, company/cyber-duck. So it'd be great to get onto some questions. And I think one here just to start with, which I think is very important for lots of e-commerce companies, is that how do you bring on board people who potentially focus more on a certain style of the website rather than its usability or accessibility? How do you bring them on board with accessibility being key? Maybe Sylvan, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so I think it's about obviously accessibility doesn't need to impact the design necessarily. It does need to be planned early on. You don't want to build and kind of design, get the design approved, build a whole website without any accessibility consideration, because if you do it too late, it might require some design changes. And that's why we're advocating that you do that early on, and that's part of the entire end-to-end process. So when you make those initial design decisions, you have accessibility baked in, and you can still go wild, go wild with your designs and make crazy creative solutions, and you can still make that most of the time accessible. So it doesn't really impact the visual element of the website once it's baked in from the beginning. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Connor.
I mean, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head there that Patrick mentioned, in that accessible design is not constrained design. Accessible design is still free and open to how you wish to use it. There are the various levels of compliance that require more or less depending on what you're doing, but something as simple as keyboard focus does not massively impact the design and can actually be a beneficial part of the design in making it clearer for all users. So I think there's an assumption there that isn't entirely correct in that making it accessible means making it dull or boring, and it's quite the opposite in most cases.
Yeah, I would agree with what's been said. I think what you're looking for is simply defined as a good website developer. Because I think a really great website developer is going to know how to build a beautiful website and is also going to know how to make it accessible. And I don't think those two things are in conflict.
Yeah, those are some great answers. In terms of next question, how do you go about building knowledge and leveling up your team when it comes to accessibility?
I can start again. Yeah, it's again very, very important. So talk to your HR team about prioritizing that. We recently did a company-wide training for us for all our developers, designers, testers. I think most department went through it to just understand the basics and some more advanced one for developers. So training, workshops, we can help as well and run some workshop or upscale your team and share some of the knowledge so you can be more independent in the future. And then build that knowledge within your team of having someone who's leading those efforts and impart the knowledge, someone who can help with the design reviews, approve the pull requests from the developers. And then it just becomes a collaboration where Cyberduck, for example, we have lunch and learns about some of the topics, or on our weekly or company-wide meeting, we have a few slides about latest thing on accessibility. So again, it's sharing that knowledge through the company, so everyone's aware of it, and then it becomes part of the process, and you don't think about it; you just do it by default.
Yeah, the WC3, which is a World Wide Web Consortium, just posted the link in the chat as well too, and they have a really great fundamentals course on this that covers accessibility for people who are working on websites. It's not just for developers; it can also be for product owners and product managers as well too. So that can be a really helpful place to start.
Yeah, that's great. As another question, I think kind of builds on from this, are there any resources or communities out there that you'd recommend speaking to in regards to accessibility? Potentially ones on Slack or LinkedIn groups?
Yeah, so there's, like I mentioned before, it's as with everyone attending this and the panelists, etc., accessibility and the awareness of it is growing such that the resource base just continues to grow. Like you mentioned there, Dan, there is an accessibility or web accessibility Slack server, which has a ton of people, a ton of resources, people discussing these points every day, because ultimately these are guidelines and criteria. So it's how you perceive it and things like that. And in the same way, the W3C, the guidelines and the criteria, though sometimes not cryptic, but challenging to read through, are openly there. It's not the best way to start, but if you're looking to fix something, say your videos, if they're hosted on YouTube, you can then go to the specific criteria for non-text or audio/visual content and look through there and build upon that again, there's continuous growth of articles and guides that are sort of easily accessible just on Google and elsewhere nowadays.
I think to add to that, we ourselves, we're very accessible. So we're very active in lots of the online communities. Again, there's lots on LinkedIn as well that I'm part of. And I think what's fantastic to see is it's accessibility experts are very passionate about what they do, and they are always willing to kind of lend a hand, whether that would be taking a look at your website or just giving you a few tips. So, you know, it's really worth it. If there's something you want to take a look at, you know, getting involved with those groups. And just as a last question, it's something we kind of discussed quite a bit today around sort of testing is, what is the best way to approach testing with users with assistive needs?
I think it's sort of a question, not in the same sense in that if you have a user, for example, you know, someone who is blind or deaf, simply letting them use the site as they would in the same way you would approach user testing will give you a lot of insight as you start. There might be small pieces that just aren't clear or visual, but to someone who is affected by them, they will be clear and bold in a sense. So I think that there's a balance between using the automated testing tools and then using their manual check recommendations. If you're doing it yourself, or you don't have any specific disability or anything that you believe is affecting you, doing it as using those as recommendations, as well as then bringing in people that you know that may be affected by these things. I think, as Sylv mentioned, and from the stats we've seen, these things are a lot more widespread than you think, and even if they're not large, simple things like, or I say simple, smaller pieces like colorblindness versus being fully blind can affect a user very differently, even if they're on a similar sort of level.
Yeah, and then the next level would be obviously professional accessibility audits. We mentioned the labs, the RNIB in the UK. But yeah, feel free to reach out and we can recommend the best solution. There's a wide range of solutions for every budget. So reach out and we'll find the best one.
Thank you very much for that. So I think just to wrap up, thank you once again to Connor, Sylvan and Patrick for their fantastic talks today. We are available, as I said, on email, as well as Twitter and LinkedIn. Always happy to have a chat. We will be sharing the full presentation with everyone who signed up. So if you joined a little bit late or had to drop off early, you will receive the full webinar next week. And otherwise, have a great rest of the day, everyone. And hopefully you'll be able to join us for our next webinar.